Hey everyone, Rich Monroe here with B&B Investing Group. Thanks for jumping on this week. As a reminder, B&B Investing Group helps real estate investors, real estate agents navigate the short-term rental model. Whether you're looking at doing acquisitions or managing properties or doing the rental arbitrage or master lease strategy, we kind of mastermind and look at all those three options and how to build a scalable business. And so part of building a scalable business, obviously, with acquisitions is basically investing in real estate, whether you're buying real estate distressed and fixing it up or but buying it to convert into a short-term rental. And so I have a friend of mine on today with us, Farley Youman, who is very experienced in the commercial lending and hard money lending and private money lending field. And we're going to dig in today on a couple different things and strategies that I think will definitely help and benefit us as real estate investors. So Farley, thanks so much for jumping on today. Give us a bit about your background.
Thanks a lot, Rich. So basically, I kind of got a late start in real estate. Nobody told me when I was younger, anything about real estate. My master's degree didn't tell me anything. So I finally went into it. But when I went into it, I really went into it hard. I read 60 books on real estate investing. After that, I started house hacking my own house. Also fixed and flipped for a while, about to go back into that actually. And I was a mortgage officer in 2014 and 2015 for the state of Georgia. Now I do loans all over the nation. The great thing about my job is I don't have to be licensed. I repeat, do not have to be licensed. And that is true in virtually every state except for California, Arizona. So mainly setting up the loans now and also training people to either do loans, wholesaling, or other things in real estate.
All right, very cool. So that's quite impressive. 60 books on real estate investing. Do you have a couple favorites to recommend to the members?
Yeah, a lot of people ask me that question. Every book, of course, it overlapped a little bit. And I've been going to the Atlanta meetings for 18 years now, and now down to Florida and Tennessee the last few years. Nobody I've ever met has read more than about 20 books, but every book really had a little bit different of an angle. So I would say there's really no particular favorite one. There was one on creative financing, but of course, creative financing doesn't work all the time. It can, but every book was a little bit different. Marketing, building new construction. You're going to learn something from each book. But it took me 3 years to do that, by the way.
Got it. So we're going to touch on a couple of things today, and I think before we do that, can you kind of give us an update on what's currently going on with lending in real estate and kind of where things are? How have the higher interest rates impact investors, if at all, and kind of what that landscape looks like for us?
That's a good question, and it's one that actually comes up a lot. So just realize, hard money loans were already fairly high to begin with because they're more risky than a regular mortgage where somebody's living there. So our rates really were not affected nearly as much as the mortgage world with houses. So that's one thing. There's a lot of negativity out there. Every time I go to a meeting or I'm on the street, it's a bad time to do real estate. Not from what I can see. One of the main sources I use right now is for 100% funding. We'll get into that a little bit more here in a minute. And this particular source doubled their loans in February over the February before. So, of course, it's hard to find a great deal in Atlanta. But when you do find the right deal with the right numbers, there's still plenty of money to be had. So I don't really think it's affecting the type of loans I do, in all honesty. In fact, we're increasing or at least staying at the same pace.
Okay. And just for folks that are new to real estate investing, if you could help us understand or describe just the basics of, what is a hard money loan? How does it work? How is it different from a traditional mortgage? Just for some of us that are kind of getting started with it.
Okay, that's a good question because a lot of people think that we look for the same things. We might look for a couple of the same things, like we're still going to look at your credit score. Normally, I can't go below 600, but I have one or two sources might be able to go down into the 500s. What we don't do that a bank does is we don't require, trying to figure out all your debt and all of that. We don't go into your taxes usually. Well, the main thing we're looking at is the numbers that every lender looks for. And it's the first thing anybody should learn with loans, whether they're, going to do loans, set them up like me, or whether they're going to get one. So the 70% loan to value is that, I mean, that's literally written in stone. Doesn't matter what ARV is at, that's what they're going to look at first. 70, I can sometimes get up to 75% depending on the deal. So the easiest way to look at it, you're going to buy a house for $600,000. You're going to put $100,000 in for the renovation, and the appraiser says it's going to sell for $1 million. We've got a loan right there that's qualifiable at 70%. So that would be the first thing, anybody really should look at or learn as far as the numbers.
Yeah, so 70% of the after repaired value, to include your purchase cost as well as your rehab cost, as long as it's within those parameters. And so a lot of times when investors are putting in offers or wholesalers or trading deals, pretty much everyone's going to use that basic formula as a starting point. And then it's really up to you to do your due diligence to make sure that you're qualifying that after repair value. We're going to talk about appraisals today as well. It's an important part of investing. And so it's critical that you have, those numbers that are, when you buy something, that it's pretty close to where you're going to actually end up, or else you're going to kind of be upside down on the deal.
Well, I mean, obviously we can't set you up for a loan unless you go by those numbers, unless you're willing to bring a little bit of extra money. But like you said, you're not, if it's 80% loan to value, I mean, maybe you'll still make money, but your numbers are getting more and more tight. I would say the loan formula is the quickest way to figure out whether you can make money. Before you start thinking about interest payments, there's a reason why the lenders do 70% or less, maybe 75 at the most. That they know that you can make money, and most of them want you to make money, 99% of them. So yeah. What if you got a deal that's 65% loan to value? Well, that would be better than 70. So if you got one like that in Atlanta, sign the paperwork. If not, send it to me or Rich. We'll sign it, and we will do that deal, because it's very hard to find in Atlanta 60% right now in Atlanta, but maybe in other areas. But yeah, definitely that's the first step, analyzing a deal. It only takes a minute.
All right. So there's typically with that investment loan, you're typically going to have a down payment requirement of some sort. Traditionally, usually 10%, I believe, is a standard. And then you're usually looking at a 12-month term, typically enough time to do your rehab, hopefully within 4 to 5 months. And, if it takes a little bit longer, but then you're also, if you're doing fix and flip, it gives you the time to sell that. Or if you're doing fix and hold for long-term as a short-term rental, then that gives you time to refinance out of that loan during that 12-month window. During the 12 months, obviously, you typically have interest-only payments. So there are, carrying costs associated with the loan. You also, again, for folks that are new to this, need to make sure you have enough in reserves. Even though your hard money loan is going to include the cost to rehab the property, you're still going to need to get started with your contractors and your materials, and have some funds available to start that process. You can basically do your draw request from the lender once each part of your construction is done. And so you will be able to draw that down from your loan, but you're going to need to have like a 30, 60, 90-day buffer to be able to have the funds available to float that before you get the work done, essentially. Did I miss anything on that, Farley?
Well, I'm glad you brought up the reserves, because definitely people need to think about that. The worst case scenario is you don't have reserves enough, and you get to the end of the project, and maybe there's a $20,000 surprise on the renovations you didn't see coming. This might be one of the top reasons when people fail on fix and flip. They literally run out of money. Lenders don't normally like it when you call them back asking for more money. You're the professional, you should be, and you should have got your numbers right to begin with. So we do require, some lenders will require a reserve. But before I get into that, I have great news. Instead of the traditional 10% down on the purchase, I do have a source that can give you 100% funding, assuming you have that 70 to 75%. We normally can't go up to 75% if it's a loan for more than $500,000. Usually we can if it's below 500, but definitely 70% or lower. So I have a source. It's the only source I have, and this is the reason. Literally, in the last few months, everybody wants this source. I mean, when I explain this one to other people, like other options, like literally everybody's going with this option, and it's because they get 100% financing. So instead of 10% down on the purchase, they don't put anything down on the purchase or the renovations. Now, obviously, you got to have the money, like Rich said, to make your first draw. Let's say you're going to do the roof first, and that's $15,000. That's got to come out of your pocket. Make sure it's a certified roofer. Then we come out and inspect it, and then we give you that money. So you need some cash reserve there. And you got to make your interest payments, of course, until you sell the house. We have a formula. Not every lender is the same on this, but the 100% funding one, we use the 25% cash reserve rule. So if you're on 25% of the renovation. So if your renovation is $80,000, we expect you to have $20,000 for the cash reserve, so that you can make those payments.
Can that also be in the form of a line of credit?
Well, as long as it shows in your account with this particular lender, we don't really care where the money comes from. Some lenders do; they'll want to know where you got the money from, but this particular source, we don't. As long as we see it in your checking or savings, you're good to go.
Yeah. All right. So for those of you guys that are watching, throw a yes in the comments for me if you want to learn more about how to pre-qualify for this 100% financing, and if it's something that'll be helpful for you in your real estate business. So what are the initial requirements? Now, one of the recent loans I did was actually 100% financing, but there were pretty strict requirements on the fact that I was experienced. I've probably done over 40 rehabs in the last 5 to 7 years. So are there like experience requirements, or can somebody do this as just getting started?
Yeah, normally there's experience, and it depends on what you're doing. Like when we have brand new construction, we're mainly talking about fix and flip loans today, renovating, adding value to the house and then selling it. But new construction, either you or your construction team would have to have what I call financial experience. You will have had to profit from doing new construction. We don't, and some lenders, like Rich says, some lenders want you to have experience, and otherwise they'll make you jump through all kind of hoops. This particular source, your experience background doesn't matter that much. I mean, I set up loans for fix and flippers that have no experience, so that's not a problem. But if it's new construction, the reason everything is the lenders are just unbelievable on what they know about the industry over the years. And what they've found is if you don't partner up with either a builder or somebody who has financial experience on new construction, the default rate is through the roof. So when I train people to do brand new construction, I tell them, look, you should want to have a builder that has financial experience, and you should want to give him part of the profit. Now you're going to make less profit. But the way I do deals, everybody's going to be sweating with me. If I partner up with Rich, I mean, it gets hot in Atlanta in July. We're both going to be sweating until we make our money. You're not going to make a lot of money, or me, until the deal's done. And that's where, if I did new construction, I would get a builder that has financial experience. That way we can vet that with a lender. I already have one in mind that I can think of here in Atlanta, and we put it together. But if it's a fix and flip, your experience doesn't matter that much.
All right. And so are you able to do this particular 100% financing loan in other states besides Georgia?
Quite a few states. I don't have the whole list right here. We can do it in most states.
The most, like the Southeast. We have quite a few of our members that are in Florida, for example, Carolinas.
Yeah. Most of the Southeast we can do. Now, there is a way to get, the 100% funding even with a new construction. We have to look at it a case-by-case basis. But let's say you have a burned property or a house that, just can't be brought back to life. You're going to tear it down to the foundation and build it back up. We might be able to kind of consider that a hybrid, half renovation, half new construction. It really make no sense to me, because to me, the house is new. You built it new from the foundation up. But for some reason, the lenders look at that a little bit different. One reason why they do, and this makes sense, is the foundation is already there. and the utilities up to the house are already there. Just think of, and some of my clients don't want to hear this stuff, but just think of it from the lender standpoint, or if you were handing out your own money. If you're handing out your own money and somebody came to you, they have no experience, it's just a raw piece of land, and you fail, then they got to take over that project. And lenders really, they don't want to work hard like Rich and I do, and the people listening in today. They only want one thing. They want you to pay the interest payments, finish the house, sell it, and then they get paid off. That's all they want. They really don't want your house back. Trust me, 99% of them. There is the 1% that will literally try to take the house from you. They have ways of doing that. And of course, I won't refer any loan source that does that method.
So on this particular program, what is the typical interest rate?
That's a good question. So I'm going to give two scenarios. I'd like to see what the audience thinks, because I've asked this question a lot of my clients. So I'm going to give two scenarios to make this crystal clear. You've got one lender that will give you the lowest rates out there, which right now are around 10 on a fix and flip. They might go lower as this year develops, but whatever's the lowest out there, I can get you. But let's just say it's 10 flat, and that's the lowest in the industry, let's say. All right, so 10%. However, that's assuming you have a good credit score. However, you are going to have to come to the closing table with 10% of the purchase. We're going to say it's a $300,000 house. So you just put $30,000 down right there. And then you got closing fees from the lender and the attorney. We're just going to give rough numbers and say you got to come up with $45,000 at closing. So that's option number one. All right, we're going to see if the audience likes that better, or option two, you're going to come to the closing table with, instead of $45,000, you're going to come with $15,000, simply because you have no down payment. But like Rich was probably alluding to, the catch, if there's a catch, is that the interest rate will be 12.99. Not a big difference on loans that are $300,000 or $400,000. That most of my flippers, that's what they're doing. They're doing loans of about $250,000 to $400,000. Might make a big difference on $800,000 loans. So from the audience, if there's a way we can figure out which one do they like better. Option one, 10% interest rate, $45,000 at closing, or option two, 12.99 interest rate, but only $15,000 at closing.
Yeah, and obviously, put it in the chat for us, guys, if you like option one or option two. From somebody that likes to grow their business at scale, obviously, if you can do option two, well, guess what? Now you can do close 2 to 3 similar size deals with the same amount of cash, instead of just doing one deal. Instead of coming up with $45,000, you can use that same $45,000 and split it across 3 deals if you wanted to. So definitely gives you that flexibility.
So when you think about, if you've ever watched Shark Tank, they talk about the word Rich has talked about, scaling up. That's the whole point of loans to begin with, is put as little money in as possible so you can scale up. Now, maybe you're at the stage where you just want to do one house at a time right now. But hey, if you make money on the first 3 big time, then why wouldn't you want to double or triple that by scaling up? There's another reason, though. I mean, there's multiple reasons, but one, I always say in my training classes, especially if it's your first deal or really any deal, you want to put as little money in as possible. Why? Less money, less risk, especially if it's your first deal. You really want to put $45,000 out on your first deal. I wouldn't advise it.
Yeah, and I'm perfectly fine with paying an additional 2 or 3% in interest during that window of time. In the grand scheme of things, whether I'm doing a fix and flip or if I'm going to refinance out after the rehab, that 2 or 3% is really not going to move the needle, and it's really just a benefit in being able to have less cash at the closing table for sure. And so it looks like Farley, a lot of folks are choosing option two, which is no surprise. That's definitely a productive way to do that. Now, if somebody wanted to kind of do a deep dive on a project with you to explore that, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Sure. They can either call me. My number is 770-817-0559. It'll probably pop up on the slide. Or you can email me, Farley@topoptioncapital.com, and we can go through One of the things I do, I really just don't, quote interest rates. I mean, a 15-year-old can do that in all honesty. Literally like questions come in, I'll answer them. I always, before I send out the term sheet, I call the client. I say, "You ready to go through the term sheet?" And I see if they have any questions. Because in all honesty, even investors that have been doing loans for 10 years, they can't read everything on the term sheet usually. So that's fine.
Yeah.
That's what I'm here for.
All right. I just threw your name and your contact information out in the chat so folks can get access to that. Feel free to let them know that B&B Investing Group referred you over. And so the other topic we wanted to talk about besides the 100% financing, which is also directly related, is the importance of the appraisal and making sure that you get the appraisal maximized to be sure. Now, obviously, the appraisal is going to determine your after repair value. If you are doing a fix and flip, it's going to determine what you can put your list price at. And it's also going to determine if you're going to do a long-term buy and hold and do a refinance. You're going to base your terms on your new loan as a percentage, usually anywhere from 75 to 80% of the new appraised value. So what does that mean? That means you might be able to cash out some money on the refi as well once the rehab is done. But obviously, the higher you can get that appraisal number, the better off you're going to be as an investor and as a fix and flipper. If you miscalculate what that appraisal value is in the beginning, and it turns out being a lesser number when you actually get the deal done, it's definitely going to be cutting into your potential profit or what the scope of the deal was. And so I'm anxious to hear Farley's thoughts on this appraisal. I've had some bad experiences myself personally when we did a rehab in Stone Mountain. It was like a 3-2, and it had a basement where they basically disqualified one of the bedrooms because it was below grade in the basement in the appraisal, and we kind of came in a little bit lower on the appraisal than what we originally expected. And so this is something that happens quite commonly. So love to hear your thoughts on this, Farley.
Well, like Rich said, you can avoid the lower appraisal possibly by just getting it right to begin with. So that's always a preventive measure. I mean, you try to get it right from the beginning, but in all honesty, not everybody can get all these numbers right. I'm very good at analyzing the overall numbers, but I'm not an appraiser. I'm not a real estate agent. So looking at the comps, which comps do you look at, et cetera, et cetera. Now, there is a way to develop the team around you. I mean, if you're not developing the right team around you, then you're probably going to fail in real estate. You can't do everything by yourself. That's impossible. I've been going to the meetings here in Atlanta for 18 years, so I know who to draft onto my team. People like Rich, they're an expert on Airbnb. Everybody else, I have an appraiser here in Atlanta that will literally go into that deal ahead of time and come up very quickly with a estimate as to what she thinks it is. And she's a certified appraiser. She used to work for Fannie Mae for several years. So she'll just charge like maybe $100 or $200, but an appraisal is $500 or $600. You really don't want to wait to find out that number, because if you wait, you're going to pay the appraisal fee. Possibly your fix and flip has now gone by due diligence period. You're going to lose your deposit. If the number comes back low enough, you might have to walk away from the deal. This is just not a great way to start off your real estate career. So get the numbers right to begin with. One way to get your numbers up a little bit is you are allowed, when the appraiser goes out to the house to look around, if you have super thick granite, Brazilian granite tops in the kitchen and it's super thick, and that's going to, that's a special value, then tell the appraiser that. Say, look, this is where we put a lot of our money into this, either the kitchen upgrade. Most women know that's the key, or the women that pick the houses instead of the men, it's going to be the master bathroom. So whatever it is you think adds value, you're allowed to point it out to the appraiser. What you're not allowed to do is say, okay, Miss Appraiser, this house is definitely worth $500,000. You're not allowed to get into the final value. That's her job. But you are allowed to show value and put that also in your line item budget. Because the lender is going to see that. Put in there, hey, we think this is going to add X amount of dollars of value to the house, more than what the renovation costs. Nothing wrong with doing that. So that's from the front end. If you still have the numbers wrong based off the appraiser, and the appraiser I'm thinking about in Atlanta, she normally comes in a little bit lower than some other appraisers. Certified appraisers should be about 10,000 apart. I read that 20 years ago. It's not true. I've seen even $60,000 differences in cheap houses. Rich has seen it too, based off of his expression. It's just amazing. They're all certified appraisers. How could they come up with that much of a difference? But they do. So this appraiser is actually a little bit on the conservative side. So if she says it's worth 400, you might sell it for 430. Great, you just made even more money. But if it qualifies for that 70% loan to value or lower that we talked about earlier at 400,000, you're still going to make money. And maybe she's wrong. Maybe you will sell it for 430. Maybe you know something about the neighborhood she doesn't know. This area is really changing. Great, you'll make even more money. But if her number still makes all the other numbers look good, then even if the market takes a slight dip or whatever, you're still going to make a profit. So there's about 5 things. I'll try to go through it quickly that can be done.
I'll just throw it up on the screen, Farley, so folks can see it. It's a little bit small, but these are the 5 points here.
So you could try to provide different comps that are higher that you come up with. I would suggest trying to do this again before the process starts, not after the report comes back from the appraiser. And the reason for that, imagine if an appraiser changed every appraisal based off of clients, emailing. They probably wouldn't last too long. It just doesn't look professional that they keep changing their numbers based off of customers. They've got it. It's a certified appraiser here. So probably do these comps ahead of time, and the appraiser will let you know, well, you can't use that comp, but you can use this comp. So you got to get the right comps. But it just usually doesn't work to do it after the fact. Sometimes it doesn't even work beforehand. The second option, these are all options if your appraisal comes in lower than what you thought it would. You could lower your budget. So you're going to go possibly line item by line item and just take a little bit off. Let's say the appraisal for 70% loan to value is 10,000 short. To get that 10,000 out of there, you could maybe lower each line item. Usually this is going to have to be resubmitted to the appraiser though, because she's going to have to look back through that to see if that's going to affect the ARV that she came up with. If it's only 5 or 10,000, it might not. I had one recently where they were going to try to change it by 30 or 40,000. That's probably going to raise some red flags. The ARV is probably going to have to be changed. So you just got to watch to the limit that you do it. All right. And then the third one, of course, you always go back to the seller. Maybe you found some water in the crawl space that you didn't see before. It just rained. You're like, we're going to have to pay for this. And the appraisal came in shorter. Whatever way you want to negotiate with the seller, possibly get that 10,000 off. That sometimes works, sometimes it doesn't. The fourth one would just go ahead and bring the difference in value of the closing. I mean, the good thing about this is it's 10,000 less you owe, so that means less interest. It's not really extra money because you're going to get that back when you sell the house. So you do save on interest. And then the fifth one and final one is just go ahead and take the renovation budget off completely. Just say that you're going to pay for the renovation out of your pocket. And that's fine with some lenders, but I would say most lenders do not want you to have a separate renovation paid by yourself, even if you have that money, because they will not be able to see how the process goes. I've seen bad renovations, and so the lender, usually most lenders will not allow that, but I've seen a couple that will.
Okay, very, very helpful, insightful information on the front end for sure. Now, what happens on the back end though? Let's say you've done your rehab, you projected that you could sell this thing at 420, and you get some initial feedback from an appraiser or just from a comparative market analysis that says you're at 380 or 390. What are some things you can do to kind of, let's say I'm doing a refinance, right? And it's critical that my appraisal comes in at a certain level. And so if it's at 380, it doesn't give me enough to pay off all my debt on the property and get a long-term loan. And so what are some things that I can do strategically with that appraisal? Usually the lender that's doing the refinance is going to be the one to choose the appraiser. So what, besides what you've already mentioned, are there any additional things you can do there to kind of protect yourself to maximize your value on it?
Well, a lot of it still goes back to the front end. And especially when we do the 75% loan to value, we have to get, it's actually a separate lender. We have to get a separate lender to come up with a pre-funding letter for the refinance. And so with that, in that scenario, or we could possibly run it ahead of time, if the client asks me, we already know ahead of time with such and such company at such and such numbers, they're ready to refinance. Obviously, if the numbers are too far off, you're going to have to bring some money. But the refinances always look at the same thing. The lenders there, they're going to look at your insurance per month. These are things you should be looking at anyway. I get scared when people don't know all their numbers and all their facts. If that's the case, get with Rich on the Airbnb, get with me on fix and flips, or whoever you want to get with, because if somebody says, well, you don't know all your numbers or all your factors, then it's going to get tougher and tougher for you to make a profit. So insurance per month, HOA, if any, because sometimes there's no HOA, taxes for the year. And then normally in the property management, even if you're thinking about getting a manager, you say you're going to do the management and you put 0 in for that, because we are looking for a DSCR. Some lenders are at 1.2 and some are at 1%, which really, when you think about it, what's one of the first things people learn in real estate? They learn the 1% rule on a rental. So you should want that anyway. If you're doing Rich's Airbnb, you're probably going to multiply that to what, 2-3% or more, Rich?
Yeah,
you're going to maximize 3 to 4. So you're going to maximize there. But if it's a rental property, why would you want to do one that's less than 1% anyway? The lenders when lenders don't want to do it, is because it's not because they're picky. They are picky, but they're doing that formula because they don't want you to fail.
So Farley, again, for the folks that are just getting started with this, explain for us what the 1% rule is. How is it calculated?
Okay, so if you buy a house, you put $200,000, let's say, into it, and you can get a rent of $2,000 per month, and that's the 1% rule. But the 1% rule is just a general rule, as we know. Rich and other people have ways of amplifying that number higher than that. But from the lender standpoint, it's got to be a minimum. Some lenders are at 1.2 on the DSCR rate. Some are at 1%.
Okay. Do you have any lenders that specialize or that have the ability to look at short-term rental revenue and include that as a part of their underwriting for the refinance?
Yeah, so we can do that, kind of like any other deal. It's going to be analyzed. They're either going to project from a software what that rental property can do. They might even have somebody come out, look at the place, do an analysis, what they project. We kind of prefer you to have already a year's experience, but of course people are going to say, well, Farley, if I already had a year's experience, I'd already be out of the gates. And we would use that 1 year back to analyze, your deal. But, there are ways to get around that. We may only use a percentage, like you project that it's going to pull in $4,000 a month. It'll depend on the lender, but we might only allow 80% for that. So it's always, lenders are going to look at worst case scenario. Now, if you want to get that number right more, you get with somebody like Rich to get that 4,000 or more. But I've seen, even my own house, I did Airbnb for a while, and I have a very nice room. It's almost as big as my master bedroom. I asked 5 people, what do you think? What would be the price per month for this, or per day for this room? I came up with 5 different answers. Mine was the 6th. So somebody's wrong. I'd rather go to Rich to get the closer number. We're just guessing. Rich how many units do you manage?
Yeah, we've been as high as 75 properties at one time, all different sizes. But I always try to be very conservative on the forecast, on the estimate of the revenue. What we typically do is we end up beating what the average market is doing anyway after the first 3-4 months on a new listing, because we're going to be pushing up, commanding a premium on our listing. And so anytime that we do our estimates, it's usually going to be very conservative based on the average or a little bit below the average, and then we look to exceed that by 20% over 12 months. But so this has been very helpful, Farley. It takes 3 or 4 months to really push up that nightly rate, and it's all about the hospitality and your 5-star reviews. So you need that couple of months to kind of get some good reviews under your belt. And that's what allows you to command a little bit of a premium over the average market. It kind of differentiates your listing from others. And on a 3-bedroom house, instead of doing $250 a night as an average for the market, you can get closer to $300 or $320, just depending. So
makes sense. One
quick question. I know we touched on this earlier, and I just wanted to clarify on the 100% financing. You had mentioned new construction. Is it easier to get? Well, let's say you have, like you mentioned, a partner that's experienced in doing new construction. Does that partner have to be a partner in the deal, or can they just be the contractor that I'm going to use for the new construction project?
Well, the financial experience is dealing with even if he's a builder. You would think a builder would pass all the tests from the lenders, but actually, if they have not profited on it, like they have not been on an operating agreement, then we probably would not allow that. Now, I will say, if we get 100% funding, great. But when you think about new construction, there's 2 huge advantages to new construction. One is you're putting 10% down of the purchase. Well, it's either a purchase of an old ugly house that has to be taken down, or it's just a piece of land. So let's say you can get the land for $60,000. Well, 10% of that's only $6,000. That sounds good compared to the typical, flip, $300,000. Maybe slightly less, 10% of that's $30,000. So that's the first big advantage to new construction. The second one, and this one is huge, this will save people several $1,000s, is we only charge on the money that's drawn. So your first payment is on that cheap lot. I've even seen your first payment in the hundreds, believe it or not, instead of the thousands. Then payment 2, you did the foundation. So of course it's slightly going to go up, but it's still going to be below what a fix and flip would be, at least for maybe 3 to 5 months, depending on how fast you draw the money out. So that's going to save you several thousand there.
Okay. And are you able to also get funding for accessory dwelling units as well for new construction?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes we are. You're going to get down to the city level, because I did have one last summer. It was a strange one. I mean, not only did they not want to pay for the renovation for the ADU, the lender didn't even want the client said, well, I'll just pay it for it myself. The lender wouldn't even let them do it. Something about the city and the fact that if it burned down, they would not be able to build it back up. So everything's about value with a lender. If there's a catch like that with the city and they're afraid, they're always looking at worst case scenario. Of course, the place probably wouldn't burn down, but if it did, could you replace it? And in that particular city, the answer was no. So the lender literally had to turn down the deal along with the client.
Got it. So before we close out, we do have a couple questions. You mentioned your golden nugget appraiser earlier. Somebody asked if you're able to share the name of your appraisal company that you use.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that simply because I don't want her to get bombarded with calls. So the first thing, I reach out to tomorrow to me. I'm available usually about 10 or 11 in the morning. I have a training at 12 tomorrow. Usually the best time to catch me is about 10 or 11 on most days. And that person can reach out. We can discuss how we can maybe put that together.
All right, perfect. Then the other question is on DSCR, are you calculating repairs, maintenance, vacancy, and cap expenses?
Only the things I mentioned before, the insurance, taxes, HOA, if any, and property management. That's what we always go by.
Okay, so most of these other items aren't included.
I mean, the lender may analyze them to a certain degree, but they're not a part of how we initially figure out whether we can get a pre-funding letter for you.
Got it. All right. Well, guys, I hope this was helpful. This was all, good information for you. And like I mentioned before, if you want to get a little bit more details on the 100% financing and how Farley might be able to get you some lending options on your projects, I put his contact information in the comments below. Farley, thanks so much for taking the time today. Really appreciate it. And thanks everybody for checking us out. And, as a reminder, B&B Investing, if you guys are ready to grow a scalable business and want to learn how to do that, feel free to reach out to me directly. We can have a quick conversation to see if our program is a good fit for you or not. And Farley, thanks again, buddy. Really appreciate it. I'll see you at your next event. I think you got another event coming up in April, right?
Yeah, the April 18th one, I will actually be the speaker. If everything goes well, which people are signing up right and left, this will be at the Bold Monk Brewery. We may have Rich speak eventually at one of those meetings, assuming this first one goes well. April 18th, Thursday at 7. You can just go either contact me tomorrow or go to my Top Option Capital Facebook page. There's an Eventbrite link on there. And just scroll down to that event because I've got quite a few going on. I'm going to be speaking next week for Avanta IRA on partnerships. I think that one's on April 4th, the 10 steps to a great partnership. So it's all good. I mean, if you team up with people like Rich, people in Atlanta that know what they're doing, you're going to be on the road to success.
All right, awesome. I appreciate that feedback, Farley. And again, thanks a lot for taking the time today. Thanks everybody for jumping on, and we'll see you again next week.